Right before we jump into this video, have you signed up for the FroKnowsPhoto email list? Well, if you haven't, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a real-world review of the Panasonic S1. I took this camera out to central New Jersey to a horsey farm called the Rain Dancer Therapeutic Riding Center, where we did some photojournalistic shots, some candids, some landscapes, some portraits, some close-ups, and a little bit of everything to test out this system. This is Panasonic's first go at a full-frame professional camera. Now, they've had the smaller sensor GH5 and the GH5S and other ones in the past, but this is the first time that they've come out with this full-frame version. Now, it's also a hybrid version. They're considering it the hybrid version, meaning it's meant for stills as well as capturing video. Now, for comparison, it's like the Z6 from Nikon as well as the Sony A7 III. When I do real-world reviews, I love to have a subject to work with, and in this case, we had a horse trainer by the name of Karis. If you're wondering how we got all of that cool footage that looks like you're looking through the actual camera that I'm using, well, we used an Atomos Ninja Star to capture the electronic viewfinder. So what you are seeing is everything that I saw, from the focusing points to the different modes that are changing to the shutter speed, aperture, and everything else. To start off the day, Karis went and brought in two horses that were just outside to bring them back into the stables, so this gave me a chance to start to get a feel for the autofocus and shooting capabilities of this camera. Inside this camera, you will find a 24.2 megapixel full-frame sensor that is powered by Panasonic's Venus engine. Now, that sounds like a spaceship, but it's not. It won't fly away. Now, if I had to guess, I would say that Sony is probably manufacturing this sensor, but I'm not too positive. If you're wondering if this sensor has an AA filter, it does have an AA filter. And if you're looking for a Panasonic camera that doesn't, you would be looking at the S1R. I noticed no issues having the AA filter, and most of my images look perfectly tack sharp. So luckily for us, we had a beautiful day to go out and do this real-world review. The skies were blue, there were a couple of scattered clouds, it was a little on the hot side, but there were a ton of horses to photograph on the outside, but the stables was where most of the stuff was happening. The stables were beautiful, long stable, like as long as a football field, with light coming in through skylights, painting on the floor. It was perfect for this real-world review. The ISO range of this camera is 100 to 51,200 natively, and you can expand it all the way to 204,800. Now, for this particular real-world review, I pushed it to 1,600 at its highest. Now, some of you may say, well, why didn't you push it to the extreme? And the reason is, when I'm doing photo shoots, I put the ISO and my settings where they should be because I'm using them in a real-world situation. If you want to push it further, you're going to get away with it. It's going to be fine at 6,400, at 10,000 ISO. It's probably going to be on par with the Nikon Z6 and the Sony A7 III. Now, even though I didn't shoot higher than 1,600 out during this real-world review, we did do some tests for you people who want to download those sample RAW files at higher ISOs. You can go ahead and do so to see how it handled. When I walked into the first barn, there was a horse staring at me saying, "Jared, why do you have a long face?" I'm like, "I don't have a long face, horsey. You have a long face that I want to take photos of because you have beautiful eyes and eyelashes." Panasonic decided to adopt the L mount from Leica, which means they teamed up with Leica as well as Sigma to create the L Mount Alliance. Can I pet you? Can I pet your face? Is it okay if I pet your... No? Currently, Panasonic only offers 3 native lenses for this camera. There's the 50-1.4, which is fantastic. There's the 70-200 f4, as well as a 24-105 f4. Now you hear that? That's an f4. So starting off, there's not a lot of great lens choices, even though I can get fantastic results with whatever lenses I use that they have. Right now, you are pretty limited with what you can purchase. That's one of the things that should hold you back from getting this system right now. The L-Mount Alliance has promised to have a ton of lenses out by 2020 and 2021. Now, Panasonic is considering Sigma's lenses to be native to their body. Now, I'm not sure whether they will be better than Panasonic's native lenses. If I was choosing, I will stick with native lenses all day long, but it is nice to know that there's a ton of glass coming from Sigma for this system. We noticed in the barn that there was a horse named Cal, and Cal had two different color eyes, which made for a great opportunity to get some photos. Karis also put the horse right in the middle of the barn and hooked it up to the left and the right. I don't know what it's called, but it's so that the horse doesn't move. And what great symmetry was right in front of me. And so I put the 50-1.4 on the camera again. I'm not used to doing that, Steven. I put the 50-1.4 on the camera again, got some low angle shots, focused right on the eye in single focus, and was able to nail it even at 1.4. I love the fact that I could simply move the focusing points extremely fast with the joystick on the back of the camera, and honestly, it's one of the fastest joysticks that I've seen on any of today's mirrorless cameras. This camera has 225 contrast detect autofocusing points. Now with so many autofocusing points, generally it may be pretty slow to move the focusing points around to get to the one that you want. Well, not in the S1. I think this is the fastest camera for moving focusing points around by using the joystick. It just zoomed to the left, it zoomed to the right, and it was really easy to get the focus point where I wanted it time and time again. Are you new to editing RAW files, or would you like to save some time and get a great starting point? Well, we created 14 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/presets. Over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and afters, and they are currently 40% off. Now, here's some examples of photos from this real-world review edited using FroPack 1. As Karis was grooming the horse, I noticed that it looked a little emo and that it might use a hair pick. So I gave her my hair pick, and then she went ahead and was like, "Here, horsey, let me fix your emo hair so you don't look like you're gonna cry infidelities or scream them." This camera does offer you a bunch of different autofocusing modes. You do have IAF, which I actually didn't turn on, but it also has Animal AF. However, instead of going into any of those fancy autofocusing modes, because I could move the focusing points super fast and grow them and shrink them as I needed, I just stuck with that throughout the entire shoot. Generally speaking, when I'm out and about and I talk to women, I like to check to see if they have a ring on their finger, and in this case, Karis did. She was recently engaged, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of get a horse/engagement shoot because she's close with the horses and engagements are a big thing. And by the way, she's not engaged to the horse, but she put her hand on the horse's nose, which gave me a cool opportunity to focus in on the ring to see how the close focus would work with this lens. I want to thank Adorama for setting us up with a loaner unit of the Panasonic S1 as well as the 3 lenses. Now, being that we only had one S1 to work with when we were out on location, I was taking photos with the S1 and Steven was shooting video with the Nikon Z6. Now back here at the studio, we are using the S1 as well as the 50-1.4 to shoot all of these videos. We're filming in 10-bit 420 4K in the HLG mode internally. Now, one of the things I did notice is that if you move the focusing point and you don't tap the shutter halfway down, your focusing points are still active. And if you go ahead and change the shutter speed or the aperture, you are growing or shrinking the area of your autofocus. So that's one thing you need to be careful of, that you need to deactivate those points after you activate them before you make changes to start to shoot again. Like most mirrorless cameras, you do get built-in image stabilization, and this one is giving you 6 stops of Ibis. But when you pair it with Panasonic's lenses that have stabilization, you get 6.5 stops of Ibis. In terms of using Ibis on this real-world review, I had it active the whole time, and I didn't shoot at super-duper slow shutter speeds, but I also wasn't at super extreme shutter speeds, and all of the images seemed to turn out perfectly well. One of Karis's horses by the name of Misty was due for its monthly shower. As Misty started to get a shower, I saw in my mind that I wanted to use the 51.4 and back away a little bit and get a straight-on shot that was naturally framed by the stable where the shower was occurring. If you were hoping that this camera had a vari-angle screen, it does not. It has a 3.2-inch, 2.1 million dot tri-angle screen, which is similar to what the Fujis have. That thing, well, that's Miseducation at Lauryn Hill, but I don't know any Fuji songs anymore. Now, my goal here was to get some horizontal shots to show the whole thing, but also get a little closer with some verticals to fill the frame with the focus right on the eye of the horse, and those images turned out to be pretty majestic. I didn't know what I was capturing at the time because I was just locking in on the eye and shooting, but they turned out to be some amazing images. Let's talk about the body of the S1. One of the things that I've been looking for in a mirrorless camera is more of that pro body feel, and this camera 100% gives me that. This is a massive body. A lot of people with mirrorless cameras have always looked for a smaller body because it was meant to be lighter and easier for travel, but Panasonic was like, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. We want to build a body that feels stable and strong in the hands. This feels very similar to a professional body like a D850 or even a D5. It's much larger and more substantial feeling than a Z6 or an A7 III. It's a little closer to an EOS R. Honestly, I'm happy with how this S1 feels in my hands. After shooting with the 51.4 for a while, I decided to switch off to the 24-105, which is an f4. Now this gave me an opportunity to get closer to the horse with a wider angle of 24 millimeters, 32 millimeters, focus in on the eye, and get some nice scenes going on. One of the things I like in a camera is having a dedicated button for going from single focus to continuous focus. Now in this camera, right on the back, kind of near where your thumb would end up being, is a focus switch. So you will go from single to continuous to manual by switching that. I wish there was just a dedicated button like the Canons have where I can press a button, it goes from continuous, press it again, and it's back into single. But it is much quicker to change it here than it is with some of the other systems. If you're ever wondering what type of shampoo they use for horses, the original mane and tail. Because if you'd like to shower with your horse, this is the shampoo for you. But this was a cool opportunity because I saw the bottle on the ground along with a hairbrush. The horse was in the background. Karis is showering the horse in the background. I didn't want to lay on the ground because it was wet, but I got down at a low angle, flipped the screen out, composed it the way that I wanted it, took the picture, and got this really cool advertisement shot because it really tells the story of what goes into washing a horse. After getting a bunch of photos straight on, I thought it would be a good opportunity to step to the side and try to get some profile photos. This is the first time that I've used a Panasonic out in the wild to shoot stills, and the buttons were in the right place. Every time I reached for a button, it was just right where it should have been. So Panasonic did a fantastic job building a quality body, putting the buttons right where they belong, and just making it intuitive. Nikon, Canon, and Sony should probably take note of this body design and maybe copy it. I switched back to the 51.4 from further back to get the light coming in from the skylights on the ground and seeing the horse's hoof thing sticking out with water dripping off of it with its nose there, and Karis isn't in the image. She's not seen in the image, but you know she's there showering the horse because that's what you do with the photo story. But I love the shot, the profile shot from the side. Whether it's the color version or the black and white version, I think they both work really well. One of the best features, hands down, of this camera is the EVF. Now, Panasonic calls this the Live View EVF with 5.76 million dots of resolution. As of the time of this real-world review, this is the highest resolution EVF that you will find in any camera. That's nearly double what you will see in the Nikon, the Canon, and the Sonys. Now, the reason that Panasonic calls it the Live View is because you're getting a natural representation of what your eye would see. And I can attest to that. It is beautiful looking through this EVF and shooting with it. You don't even think you're looking at a screen inside of a camera. I have not used an EVF this good yet. My exposures were spot on time and time again. What I saw in the EVF and what I saw in editing my RAW files was spot on. Whereas with the Nikon Z7, when I leave it zeroed out, my exposures sometimes are off by a half a stop up to a full stop because the EVF isn't as representative as my actual exposure. Let me jump in here real quick and say that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. I personally use Squarespace for jaredpolin.com, and I wouldn't use anything else if you're a creative. To get started right now with a 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. After getting some profile photos, I moved back to the center with the 51.4, and the horse looked like it was singing in the shower or singing in the rain. It's like, I'm singing in the rain, The horse actually didn't like getting showered, but from these images, it looked like the horse is loving it. One of the things I do not like about this camera is when I have the right exposure when I'm taking photos and I press my finger halfway down on the shutter, what happens is it gets brighter to activate the autofocus. And when you take your finger off of it, you get the real representation of what the exposure should be looking like. So what I found myself doing is second guessing my exposure to be like, is it the right one when my finger's pressed halfway down, or is it the right one when my finger isn't pressed halfway down? So it was kind of confusing, even though I got it right in the end. You just have to be aware of when you press the shutter halfway down when you're focusing, it's going to make the scene brighter so that it can activate those autofocusing points to try and get the proper autofocus. But I should point out that if you're used to using a Panasonic system, it's been doing this for a long time. But as somebody new to the system, I really hated it. I hate the fact that it changes my exposure, but it actually doesn't change my exposure. It just changes how the EVF looks. After the shower, it was time to dry the horse off in the sun, so Karis walked her out. Now, I still had the 51.4 on, and I was using continuous autofocus, and I really got a cool shot that's an awesome black and white of her walking with the horse. The contrast is thick, the focus is tight, right exactly where I needed it, and so far I'm pretty happy with how the autofocus was working. Unlike the Nikon Z6 and Z7, guess what you can get with this Panasonic S1? A grip! You can get a grip with dials and buttons, and you can put a battery in there. Shoot vertical. Hey Nikon, wake the f*** up! Now, when we got outside, the horse was grazing and drying.
Finally, I get to eat something.
I decided that I wanted to get on the horse level. I wanted to see the horse eating the dandelions or the grass or whatever it was eating, so I got down low on the ground to focus in on the nose and get some photos. But as I always say, it's good to get the tights, the wides, the details so that you can show the entire photo story. A win for Panasonic is the fact that they put in 2 memory card slots. You have an XQD card slot, which is going to be reverse compatible with CF Express, as well as a faster UHS-2 SD card slot. This means that you can do redundant photos, but also redundant video, aka writing video to both cards. Now, I do want to take an opportunity to yell at Panasonic, even though they got it right because Nikon only put in 1 card slot and Canon only put in 1 card slot. If you look on the side of this camera, when that door is flipped open, you have room for 2 CF Express card slots, not just 1. So personally, I would have put 2 in there and not relied on an SD card any longer. But Panasonic, good job. One of the reasons I got down low into the grass was I wanted some out of focus foreground elements to draw me into the subject. So you can't be afraid to get dirty or get down low or change your angle. You just have to find the shots. So normally I don't get down that low, but it just was a great opportunity to use the grass that was there with the horse to get some cool shots. After the horse dried off and Karis was walking her back into the barn, I switched off to the 70-200 f4 because I wanted to hang back further to zoom in to compress the background more and to give more compression to the image. One of the drawbacks of this camera and its autofocusing system is that they use Panasonic's proprietary Dft Autofocus. Now, for stills, what you notice is that it hunts back and forth and jumps to the background. It's always constantly moving. Now, it may not be as much of a deal breaker with stills, but when you're shooting video and you see the autofocus constantly doing this warbly shake thing, that might become a problem. Now, if this body had Nikon, Canon, or Sony's autofocus system, it might be one of the best options out there on the market, but it doesn't. So one of the biggest drawbacks is that DFD autofocus. So as you can see in the vertical shots, you could see all of the sun stripes coming in from the skylights. You can see Karis and the horse in the background, but you can see that it's more compressed than if I used a 50mm lens. That's why I like doing these distant walking shots with a 70-200, more so at the longer end. Let's talk about how many frames per second you can get. Now, in single focus mode, you can lop off 9 frames continuously in a row. It is super fast. But when you're in continuous focus, it goes down to 6 frames a second. Now, I really loved being able to shoot at 9 frames a second in the single focus. If they could give me the 9 frames a second in continuous, I would be much happier because 6 frames and the focusing system did feel like it was slowing it down and I wasn't really getting the full 6. As many of you guys know, I'm a big fan of photo stories, and that means that you take the wides, the tights, the mediums, and the details. So I walked around the stables for a couple of minutes trying to find those detailed shots. There were old boots that caught my attention that looked really cool when I captured the shot. There was also some spider webs that caught my eye that were attached to some bars in the stables. Now that helps me tell the story all around because it's not just about the horse right in front of you, it's about the details that go into the entire thing that help build a great photo story. Now there's a feature in this camera that Steven and I absolutely love that we've been waiting for a long time. Now it's not really a feature that's going to help most of you out there, but it helps me because I love recording my electronic viewfinder with the Atomos Ninja Star, and what it does is it allows me to record the audio as we're recording my EVF.
Do I smell good? That's my cologne.
But if you're gonna do something like this, it will slow down your continuous shooting to only 2 frames a second. There is a mode that allows you to shoot at 30 frames a second, and that's called the 6K photo mode. Now the problem with this is it only shoots in JPEG. I don't shoot in JPEG. Or there is a mode where you can shoot up to 60 frames a second, except you're using 4K photo stills that are about 8 megapixels. And again, it's only in JPEG. I don't shoot JPEG. Next up, I wanted to get some horizontal style portraits of Karis with the horse, so I asked her to turn the horse sideways so that she was standing looking right at her, and that gave me a great opportunity with the 70-200 to zoom in to compress the background to get some portrait-esque style images. One thing I noticed when I was shooting with the 70-200 that kind of made me happy was as I was zooming, right in the EVF, it would show me what millimeter I'm at. Now, it's not a major deal, but it was pretty cool to know that, oh, I'm at 85, or I'm at 75, or I'm at 195. It was pretty cool that it showed me what millimeter I was at when I was shooting. I wish the other companies did this one as well. With this quick portrait session, I was at f4 because the 70-200 only goes to f4. Now in the future, they will be coming out with a 70-200 2.8. I personally would prefer having the 2.8 to give me even more compression and to blow out the background in terms of focus even more. But the 70-200 f4 did a very nice job, and it's going to be a lighter lens than the 2.8 will be when that one is released. For those of you who like spraying and praying and holding the shutter button down, whether it's the 9 frames a second or the 6 frames a second, will you outrun the buffer of this camera? And the answer is, well, probably not. The reason is you have an XQD card in there. I do wish it was 2 XQD cards because it would be even faster than shooting to an SD and an XQD because I shoot redundant photos to both, but the truth of the matter is you're not outrunning this buffer in this camera. One of the coolest things about the stables were the skylights. And being that it was a sunny day, you can see the difference in the contrast between light and dark of the stables. Now that makes for some awesome streaks of light going through the stables as I'm capturing shots. Now looking back, one of the things I wish we brought with us was a can of atmosphere aerosol so that it could kind of give us the look of dust flying up in the scene and just like particles in the air, which would have hit the light really well coming in from the skylights and given us some really cool images. But even though we didn't have that, it still made for some great shots. Like most mirrorless cameras on the market, you do have the option to shoot in complete silent mode. Now, I didn't go into that mode, but it does give you 5 frames a second instead of 6 when you're shooting continuous. You can shoot full RAW, which is a good thing. It's not just JPEG, but on this shoot, we didn't have an opportunity or a need to shoot in silent. So if you do have a need to shoot in silent, you can do it with this camera, just like all of the others. Next up, Karis was getting another horse by the name of Topsy ready to go out and run. Now, because she was grooming the horse with some kind of metal-looking brush, that was throwing debris in the air, which was hitting the light coming in from the skylight, causing an opportunity to get some nice images. Now, I used the 70-200 f4 to get the whole horse and her doing the work in the shot. I love the thickness of the contrast, and I love the fact that there's debris and dust and hair flying that's interacting with the light coming in, giving me some cool images. One of the pitfalls of this camera is its battery life. Now, the battery is extra large and it does charge pretty quick with the USB-C wall charger that it comes with. But to put this into perspective is that I ran out of juice pretty much before Steven, who was shooting with the Nikon Z6 with 4K video continuously while I was doing photos. Now, that's not a good sign, but there was a good sign is that you can do USB-C charging while you actually shoot. So while you're shooting, you can be charging the battery, which will extend the life. So honestly, if I didn't have the USB-C charger with me on this shoot, we would have been screwed because after about 2 hours and a couple of hundred shots, my battery would have been dead. After shooting further back with the 70-200 to get the full horse in there, I decided to step in and get closer to fill the frame a little more. As you can see, there's dander and dust and hair flying in and still interacting with the skylights, which again gave me a great opportunity to get some nice contrasty images. Would you like to take better pictures in only 11 days? Well, I created a free mini video course that you can sign up for right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/11 days. So anybody complaining about the menu system of this Panasonic either has never used it or just hasn't taken the time to learn it. Now, yeah, it's a little weird the first time using a new menu system, but the more you use it and the more you learn about it, it just becomes simple and second nature. So I had no problem with this menu system or setting up the camera. After shooting for a while with the 70-200, I wanted to pop that off and pop on the 50-1.4 again, because I wanted to isolate the front of the horse, like its face, and have Karis out of focus in the background grooming the horse. After getting a couple of more images of just the horse in focus with Karis out of focus, I wanted to switch that up. So I moved my focusing points over to Karis. She's now in focus grooming the horse with the front of the horse out of focus. Now this is how you tell the photo story. Some of the images you're focused in on the horse, and other images you're focused in on the trainer. This camera does give you the ability to shoot 4K at 60 frames a second. Now it doesn't use the full readout of the sensor, but it punches into Super 35 to allow you to shoot at 60 frames a second 4K. However, it does offer you full frame 4K up to 30 frames a second, which is where most people are going to shoot anyway. For those who would like to unlock more video power and capabilities of this camera, there is a paid upgrade that will unlock 422 10-bit 4K full pixel readout recording internally, as well as vlog and a bunch of other features. No other camera in this category can currently do that. However, at the time of recording this real-world review, that wasn't available, but honestly, it doesn't hold us back by not having it. Stop your stomping. One of the biggest downsides to mirrorless cameras and DSLRs when shooting video has been the 29:59 record limit. Well, you'll be happy to know that this camera doesn't have a record limit in 4K, except if you're shooting at 60 frames a second. So hopefully all other cameras coming out on the market will give you unlimited record time. I can pet? You don't like me? Oh, can I do your hair? This is a hair pick, don't get scared. Oh, it's so pretty. Yes, you too can have a fro. I would have loved to have gone wider than 24 millimeters, but currently with this system, there's not a lot of options to go wider than 24. So I stuck with the 24-105 to get some wider shots that show the scene. It shows the stable, it shows Karis spraying the horse with some bug spray, but also when she exited the frame, it gave me an opportunity to try and go to a lower angle to show the horse looking large to get focus on the horse, but also another horse off to the side sticking its head out of the stable to see what was going on, and the horse was like, "Why aren't you taking my picture?" And I'm like, "Because I'm focused on this horse. Leave me alone. Go eat some hay." Adding to the great video features of this camera, the microphone preamps inside are fantastic compared to the Nikon Z6. We actually had to dial back our mic packs because of how sensitive the preamps are in this camera. So expect to get super clean audio out of this camera. After looking through a bunch of those wider shots, all done at 24, I noticed that I had some high angle as well as low angle. Now, when I was standing up at a higher angle above the horse's nose, it kind of makes the horses look smaller, but they're bigger than I am, so I got down on a lower angle, which makes things look larger. So remember that when you're out shooting, if you want to get that hero-esque style shot, get lower and shoot up just a little bit. It makes things look bigger. It may help you with your dick pics as well. So as the horse was getting saddled up to start to walk outside to go run around, I decided to walk towards the exit of the stables so I could be further away to get shots of the horse and Karis walking towards me. Now I stuck with the 70 to 200 because I like being at a distance and zooming in to compress the image. So as they're walking outside, I'm getting some nice sun streaks coming in from the skylights again, giving me an opportunity for some awesome, thick and contrasty black and whites. There was one time where I accidentally switched into manual when I meant to be in continuous, and I saw a bunch of blue lines showing up.
What is that blue? What am I seeing?
That was focus peaking, but I then switched into continuous focus. Okay. For those of you who are going to be recording externally, you'll be happy to know that this camera has a full-size HDMI port. So no longer will you break some of those mini ones, which we tend to do when we're recording video externally on the move. So what's a better way to test out the autofocus capability as well as how many frames a second you can shoot with this camera than a horse running around outside? So at first, Karis was just walking around with the horse to get it warmed up, but then she started to gallop and run. Now, mind you, this is a 25-year-old horse, so it takes some time to warm up the juices to get them flowing and to get the heart pumping to get it running. After the horse was warmed up and started to gallop, one of the things I wanted to test out was the horse running directly at me. Because one of the hardest things for cameras to do is track a subject coming right at them. So testing out the 6 frames a second and the autofocus, the horse is just galloping towards me and I'm shooting off as many pictures in a row as I can to see how the autofocus did. And it honestly did a pretty good job tracking the subject. There were 1 or 2 images that jumped all the way to the background, but then reacquired as the horse was galloping towards me. So honestly, it did a fairly good job tracking the horse with the 70 to 200 f4 running right at me. If you're looking to shoot slow motion in 1080, you can do 180 frames a second, except for the fact that it doesn't let you do manual settings. It just locks them in automatically, and it also implements a really heavy crop, which kind of defeats the purpose. But if you do want to utilize the full frame for slow motion, you can slow it down to 150 frames per second, but the playback it gives you is only 30 frames a second and not 24. Which is what we traditionally shoot in. I didn't just shoot the horse running towards me, I also tracked it as it was running across the scene, and the autofocus kept up really well, and the focusing points are easy to grow or shrink or move, and so it did a fairly good job. And this reminded me of that time when Nikon took us on a trip to a farm, and I rode a horse and almost died. I'm gonna be riding Warrior, the ultimate warrior. He just farted. It fell off. Pull back. Whoa, 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 this way. No, not backwards. Okay, now what do I do? I'm learning how to drive a horse. Thanks, Nikon. Do you want to show the world that you shoot raw? Well, if you'd like to pick up some I Shoot Raw swag, head on over to store.FroKnowsPhoto.com where you can pick up shirts, hats, and even some lens cloths. A nice feature of this camera is something that the D850 and the Nikon D5 have that the Z6 and Z7 don't have, is back illuminated buttons. It really comes in handy when you're in low light situations or if you're shooting astro photos. It's nice to be able to see where the buttons are and not have to shine a light on it. If you'd like to take a 96 megapixel image with a 24.2 megapixel sensor, you can do it with this camera. That mode is called High Resolution Sensor Shift mode. Basically what it's doing is taking 4 pictures, stitching them together, and giving you more megapixels. After shooting the action shots, Karis was walking the horse back into the stables, and Steven and I took a walk around the grounds looking for some landscape shots, looking for some opportunities to get close up to either flowers or weeds or just things with colors to show what this camera is capable of doing at lower ISOs. Let me lay down on the ground here and try to get these flowery things in focus with horsey autofocus. Not that I want to lay down in my nice jeans, but I'll do it. I'll do it for you guys at home. Shoe fly. Bugs. You know, because normally I don't shoot things like twigs on a post with a tree in the background, but why not? Let's take a look at the price of this camera because it's up here when it's compared to the other systems around it that are similar. It's $2,500. Now that's much more expensive than the Z6, than the A7 III, and it's even more expensive than the EOS R, which used to hold the title for most expensive in this little market. Even though this is a $2,500 camera and it's more than the Z6 and the A7 III and the EOS R, maybe it's priced more because you're getting some better features when it comes to video. You're also getting better build quality, so is it worth it? That's for you to determine if the extra money spent is worth the extra features that you get. For the longest time, I wanted to go out to stables to capture images of horses, and this was my first opportunity to actually go out and do it. Now, using the Panasonic S1 with the 3 lenses that I used, I had a fantastic time out on the farm capturing these images. I want to thank Karis for giving us the opportunity to come out and use her as a subject along with the horses as well as the stables. I had a fantastic time. I know that Steven did as well, but the only way to determine how good these images really are is to go back to the studio to analyze the images. Hey Misty, are you ready for some mane and tail? No. Yeah, that's right. Mane and tail. So now it's time to take a closer look at some of these images, and I do want to let you know that you can download the sample RAW files so that you can pixel peep them to your heart's content to see whether you like them or you don't like them. But I also want to wrap up this video at the very end by giving you my final thoughts, and if I think that you should purchase this camera or sell the other gear from other manufacturers that you have in order to invest in this Panasonic system. But now let's jump into the images. So this one was taken at 1/500th of a second, f1.4, ISO 250 at 50 millimeters with the 51.4. Now let's take a closer look at the eyeball right here. We're zooming in 1:1 and the eye looks fantastically sharp. It was really easy to move the focusing points, as I said earlier, and the fact that it nailed it right where I wanted it is great. I loved the 51.4. I really wish Panasonic had more lenses at the time of the release, more 2.8 glass, because really all I had was a 24-105, the 51.4 and the 70-200 f4. They all did a very good job. I just really loved the quality of the 51.4 and hope that they can get more glass out sooner that is native. But I love the angle that I was able to capture here. Low angle, ooh, there's a horse out of focus in the background, but it wasn't distracting because I didn't even see it there. We've got some backlight coming in from up above to give us a nice haloing effect right here, which is super cool, and I love the tones that are in the image. Now, we talked a lot about the shower scene. This was just one of those shots where I locked in on the eye and was able to just capture it again at 1.4. Now, let me just reiterate one more time that when I'm out doing a real-world review, I'm shooting the way that I normally would shoot on any other gig. So I'm not just saying, okay, I need to do those super high ISO tests where I'm gonna go to a place that I normally wouldn't go just to push. If push came to shove and I needed to push the ISO further in this situation, I would have. But I like to keep it as real as possible so that it's, well, real. There's no other word to use there. But I love it. I love the fall off. I love the tones. I love the colors that I'm able to get out of it and the sharpness. I was very impressed with what I was able to do when using this camera. Again, the 51.4 coming up. We've got other lens choices as well. But I just love how she falls off. It's nice and soft, and the black and white is super contrasty, but it looks really good in my opinion. So this one was again at 1.4, 800 ISO, 1/250th of a second. Now we move on to this. This was that low angle shot done with the 24 to 105 f4. 1/25th of a second, and I just loved this angle. I thought this told a great story. You got the mane and tail, you have, she's cleaning the horse, she's holding a bottle of something, which I think may be mane and tail, and the horse is looking at you. So I was pretty happy with what I got there. Moving on, I picked this shot because I just loved how the water was running off the horse as it was getting the shower. I have this in black and white, I have this in color. It was a toss-up to decide which I liked. I kind of am drawn to the black and white right now, but that may change. But I love the tones, I love the focus. It's right where it needed to be. I also do want to talk about the video real quick. We're using the Nikon Z6 right here, but all of the other video prior to this where we're standing at the factory telling you about the camera, like I said, that was done with the Panasonic S1. And I will say that this camera is packed full of professional video features that may rival the Nikon, the Canon, and the Sonys. The only issue right now is if it's a run-and-gun camera, it's not the best for autofocus, for the continuous autofocus, because you get a lot of the warble and a lot of front focus, back focus, front focus, back focus. You can see that happening. But if you're looking to get into video and you have, say, a Panasonic GH5 already or a GH5S, and you want to go full frame, once this bad boy has enough lenses for it, I think it's going to be a fantastic option for shooting video. Jumping back here to the next image, I just liked getting, I kind of wanted to show you the 50mm. Look at the contrast and the sharpness. Even though we're at f2.2, it looks fantastic. But I wanted to show you the next one because this is what you get with the 70 to 200. It's slightly different. I'm zoomed out to 133 here. This one is 50. I mean, to me, that is a really cool shot inside of a stables with all of the different light coming in from the skylights. It just makes for a nice leading lines. Just there's so much about it. Symmetry, everything is in it, and I love the tones. This is a little flatter, I think, with the 70 to 200 f4. I think a lot of that has to do with the glass. The 70 to 200 is a very light feeling lens, but I rather have the 2.8, and you can see how the prime, the 51.4, looks fantastic and just a little more punchy. I'm not getting as much punch out of the 70 to 200. But of course, it didn't hold me back. I didn't find that anything in this camera was holding me back from getting great results, not the lenses, not the body. The design of the body is fantastic. This is a heavy feeling camera that if my Nikons or if a Sony felt like this or if a Canon felt like this, man, would I be happy. And I think those three companies need to take a look at what Panasonic did here and say, yeah, we want to make real bodies too, not just little bodies, because they're about to hit the floor. If they do hit the floor, they're probably not going to last as well as if this hit the floor, though you never want to drop any of your gear. I really love the feel of this, and if I was using it full time, I would have a grip on it because I love vertical grips. This is just getting lower with a 50mm, just showing you got some stuff in the foreground out of focus. It was just one of those cool shots that isn't something that I normally do, but it just called to me. Actually, Steven called to me because he was getting low angle shots. He's like, you should probably try to do this, so I ended up doing it. 70 to 200 again, just love the composition here. I think it works well for the portrait. If I was to point out one thing I don't like, it's this over here on the right-hand side. I didn't notice that when I was shooting. It could be seen as a distraction, but other than that, I'm happy with how this looks. Moving on, I just liked the angle here. Out of focus thing in the foreground, and then it draws us into her doing what she's doing. Solid black and white, 400 ISO. But again, time and time again, hitting at 1.4 is important to me. That says a lot about the camera and its focus. So the fact that it kept hitting at 1.4 is great because we know with DSLRs, sometimes you run into issues at 1.4 where it's hard to nail it. But in this case, it did a nice job. Wider shot, 70 to 200 at 150mm. Love the contrast, love the tones. We're at 1000 ISO, so it didn't push it too far. I did push this image back here to 1600. Again, it looks fine. If you want to pixel peep and go all the way in on it, you're going to see noise and grain, but that is totally acceptable and totally normal what I'm seeing in the shot. I like this shot. This is, I just like everything that's happening. I like the dust and the dander that's flying, so I'm really happy with that. This is one of my favorite shots from the entire thing. I just love the lower angle. Now this is with that 24 to 105, so I was able to get a fantastic result with it. The horse is looking at me. You got the horse on the left not looking at me. You've got the whatever these instruments, these tools are right here. This is definitely a great storytelling shot and one of my favorites from the entire shoot. Now I'm showing you this one's out of focus and this one's out of focus. This was the rapid fire succession shots that I did of the horse running towards me. The first one's out, the third one's out. Of the 27 pictures, maybe only 2 or 3 kind of missed, which isn't bad in 27 in a row of the horse running at me. And I picked this just to show you that she's in focus and she's really perfectly fine here. So the camera did a very nice job with the continuous autofocus. Of all of the systems, this isn't my favorite for the continuous autofocus. I would love to see Sony's in here. I think Nikon's, well, I'd love to see dual pixel AF. That one works well. I just think it can get better. It's a really great starting point, and it didn't hold me back. I just think it will continue to get better. This is obviously an action shot, and then a last action shot right here as well. Love the contrast and the tones and the colors out of this. Even at f4, the background is still blowing out nicely in terms of the bokeh. A 2.8 probably would have a little more separation from the background, but in this case, I'm really happy with the results that I captured right there. Now let's talk about the Mount Alliance real fast. That is one of the only things that is holding this camera back as we speak. It's the choices of lenses. You really don't have them. But come 2020 and 2021, when they have 40 plus lenses out, and we're talking art lenses, we're talking high-end quality glass, they may have better options than Sony has by 2021 for using this system. I enjoyed using this camera. It felt great in the hands. If you said, Jared, you can just use this camera on a shoot with those 3 lenses, could you do it? And the answer is absolutely yes, because we all know it's the photographer, but you also have to understand that the right tool to get the job done is important. And I didn't have a problem or wouldn't have a problem taking this out in its current form, though I would want better glass moving forward. So if you were looking to buy a full-frame mirrorless camera for around $2,500 or a little less, what system should you go with? Would you go with the Canon, the Nikon, or the Sony, or now this Panasonic? It's a pretty easy decision to make right now as I'm making this video, because there's not enough glass to make this a viable option today. But Panasonic is all in on this system. They have 3 different models, including this one, that are either out or coming out. They have a ton of glass coming. They're in this for the long haul. It seems like they're really invested, and I have to say they did a fantastic job, better than I expected. I didn't expect to ever say that I would be using a Panasonic full-frame mirrorless camera to go do stills, because we all thought they were just about the video. But this, as a hybrid camera, is a really nice option, and with more glass, it will become a decision maker. You will have to then make a decision between Nikon, Canon, and Sony and Panasonic, because I'm really happy with what they did the first time out. So that's basically gonna wrap it up. Don't forget you can download the sample raw files to see for yourself whether you like it or don't like it. If you love real world reviews, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up and leave some comments down below. And that is where I'm gonna leave it. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.